Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something completely fascinating: how a tiny, ancient linguistic quirk can entirely reframe the way you handle that intense physical sensation of anger. If you've ever struggled with keeping your cool in high-pressure situations, this is going to be incredibly practical for you. I mean, we all know those universal triggers, right? You get cut off in terrible traffic, a difficult boss makes a snide comment, or, oh, the worst, that agonizingly passive-aggressive per my last email message drops right into your inbox. Instantly, your chest heats up, your face flushes, your breathing gets all shallow. Well, what's amazing is that the ancient Hebrews actually saw exactly what was happening in your body during these moments, and they built that physiological reality directly into their language. Let's kick things off with the root as angered. Take the ancient Hebrew word f. Now, what is just mind-blowing about this word is that it literally translates to nose, but it's also their exact word for anger. Why? Because they were observing basic biology. When you're furious, what happens? Your nostrils flare out and your face flushes bright red with blood. Because of this very visible physical reaction, the ancients literally called the state of anger being hot-nosed. It wasn't just a clever metaphor to them. It's literally exactly what your face is doing. But, if being hot-nosed is the problem, what exactly is the solution? Well, they had a word for that too: Eric Aphiam, which translates word for word to long of nose. The ultimate counter-strategy to a hot nose is having a metaphorical fuse so incredibly long that by the time the spark actually reaches the explosive charge, wisdom has already arrived to diffuse it. It's all about extending the distance between the trigger and your reaction. Which brings us to our next concept: the crouching predator. To really grasp this, we have to look at the word rovets. This describes the precise posture of a predator. Think of a large cat, lying completely still, pressed super low to the ground, its weight shifted forward, just waiting for the absolute perfect moment to strike. When the very first human emotional failure happened in ancient texts with the story of Cain, God didn't just tell him to, stop feeling angry. Instead, he actually offered a threat assessment. He warned him that sin wasn't just some vague philosophical concept, but a rovets, a literal predator using the heat of his anger as camouflage. And that gives us this famous quote: "Sin is crouching at your door." This reveals something absolutely vital for us today. A hot nose isn't just a biological reaction to a bad day. It is an open door. And if you do not master your nose, whatever hostile force or terrible decision is waiting right outside that door will inevitably master you. So let's break down the mechanics of this and the physics of fury. The physics here brilliantly illustrate the sheer difference between explosive vulnerability and true emotional power. A hot-nosed individual operates on a tiny 1-inch fuse. There is literally zero gap between the stimulus and the detonation. Just boom. But a long-of-nose individual, they operate on a 10-foot golden fuse. For them, the gap itself is the strategy. The distance you can create between the stimulus and your response is your entire battlefield. Ancient wisdom, specifically in Proverbs, frames this architecturally, saying, "A person without self-control is like a city with broken walls." Now, in the ancient world, broken walls didn't just mean a slight military disadvantage. They meant the absolute total exposure of your identity, your community, and your livelihood. This proves that uncontrolled, explosive anger doesn't signal dominance or strength like we sometimes think. Instead, it shows absolutely everyone watching exactly how to get inside your head. It's a massive, blinking sign that your defenses are completely down. All right, so how do we fix it? That's where we get into the EQ reordering protocol. The book of James outlines the exact perfect sequence for emotional intelligence: quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Notice that order. Listening comes first, really absorbing what is actually happening. Speaking is second. And anger? Anger is dead last. But in a state of system failure, most of us run this entirely in reverse, don't we? We flash with fury immediately. We speak out of that intense heat. And because we've already exploded, we never actually get around to listening. Think of it like an emotional runway. Wisdom is almost never an instantaneous thought. It's a heavy airplane that needs plenty of distance to touch down cleanly. If your emotional runway is only 10 feet long, wisdom's gonna crash into a brick wall every single time, and let's be honest, nobody wants to clean up that wreckage. To land that plane smoothly and deliberately, you absolutely must lengthen your runway. You have to buy yourself time. Let's look at the psychological cost of this. Think of anger as real estate.
Take the Greek word topos, which literally translates to a place, a location, or a foothold. The Apostle Paul actually instructs his readers not to let the sun go down on their anger, specifically so they don't give the devil a topos. This is wild because it tells us that unresolved anger isn't just a lingering feeling, it's actual physical real estate. When you go to sleep furious, you're literally handing a dark, destructive force a physical address right inside your own mind.
Ask yourself honestly, have you ever fired off a 2 a.m. email that, in the harsh, embarrassing light of day, didn't even sound like you wrote it? Yeah, we've all been there. That slightly painful, highly relatable regret happens because unresolved anger installs a hostile tenant in your mind. And worse, this tenant starts furnishing the space with your own legitimate grievances. It uses your history and your pain to build an airtight case that ultimately just destroys your own relationships. That 2 a.m. email? That wasn't really you. It was the tenant you accidentally let sign a lease in your head.
So how do we practice this in the moment? Let's talk about the breath discipline.
Here is where the linguistics become an incredibly practical tool. The Hebrew word for nose is the exact same word for breath. Af means both. Therefore, the ancients completely understood that lengthening the nose and lengthening the breath are the exact same physical act. So, what's the protocol here? It's just one single breath. When that trigger hits, before you type, before you speak, before you fully commit to a reaction, take just one long, intentional, deliberate breath. In that moment, you aren't just taking in oxygen, you are physically enacting the ancient strategy of the long nose. You are actively putting vital distance between the spark and the explosive charge. This ancient proverb perfectly encapsulates exactly why this matters so much. Better is a person slow to anger than a mighty warrior. Now, in the ancient world, the ultimate flex of power was a heavily armored warrior violently conquering a walled city. But this wisdom flips that entirely upside down. Governing your own interior with a single, disciplined breath actually places you in a much higher category of true power than the greatest warrior on any battlefield. And here is the really profound poetry behind all of this. The very physical passage that flares red in fury is the exact same passage that, according to ancient texts, first received the divine breath of life. I mean, think about that. This means that every single time you get hot-nosed, you are standing at a critical intersection. You are holding the immense power to either use your breath to destroy everything around you or to breathe deliberately and restore order. Which brings us to our final question for you to ponder today as we wrap up this explainer. The predator is out there, and it is crouching at the door of your reactions. But your breath is the lock. So will you throw that door wide open in explosive fury, or will you take a breath, govern your spirit, and lengthen the fuse? The choice is absolutely, entirely yours.